While there is more information than ever out there, it is still difficult to learn as a beginner poker player. Knowing exactly where to start and what to focus on is the biggest challenge. In this video, I will focus on the things that have the most bang for your buck in taking control of your game and starting down the path toward profitable poker. The poker tips in this video are common sense things that you can do to instantly improve your game as a beginner to intermediate player. I will try to explain these concepts in the most simple terms possible, since most teachers talk way over the heads of their students. However, if there is something that isn't clear, please refer to my poker tutorial on my website. I'll put the link above and below. Let's get started. Back in 2012, I was trying to think of a way to sum up what leads to profit in poker in the simplest way possible. I had played a lot of sports growing up and always learned the fundamentals first. So why couldn't the same thing be done in poker? So I came up with 3 actionable fundamentals that, when practiced, will instantly make an unskilled player or novice player better at the game. They are position, initiative, and pressure. Position basically just means that you should seek to act last after the flop as much as possible while minimizing your exposure to being out of position. If you play in position more than your opponents and out of position less, you have an inherent advantage over them since you will always have more information. Initiative means to have the lead, or to be the last raiser going into the flop. Being the aggressor is advantageous since it often makes your opponents play fit or fold after the flop. It goes like this: you raise, they call before the flop. The flop comes down, they check, you bet, and you win regardless of whether you improved or not. Always considering the aggressive action first is something winning players do. If a passive action like checking or calling and an aggressive action like betting or raising are both profitable, then the aggressive action is almost always the most profitable play to make among the two. This is due to fold equity, which I covered in my last beginner tips video. I'll put a link above and below to that video and be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Before you act in a hand, if you try to follow these 3 fundamentals, you will make much better decisions at the table and be worlds ahead of most of your opponents at the smaller stakes. When first learning the game, I recommend that students have fundamentally sound charts either on their desktop for online players or in their pocket for live players. These charts would cover just about every situation you can face. They would include which hands to open raise, which hands to 3-bet or 4-bet, when to continuation bet, when to raise or re-raise, everything. Using them as a guide or training wheels while you play will keep you on track and help eliminate leaks as you go. Once you use the charts for a few thousand hands, making solid decisions will become second nature. By the way, I also give away free pre-flop and post-flop charts on my site. Once again, I'll put a link in the description, or you can just click if you want to check them out. I know this is a beginner video, but the concept of stack-to-pot ratios, or SPR, isn't as complicated as you might think. You just need to know how to do simple division. SPR is a tool to use on the flop to help determine your hand strength relative to the size of the pot. Let me explain this in simple terms, since it really is just common sense. If the pot is relatively large when compared to how much money you have left, you have an incentive to fight for the pot with weaker hands. However, if the pot is small and you have little money invested, you need stronger hands to commit more money. As an extreme example, imagine you have $100 in your stack. If the pot is just $4, it wouldn't make sense to invest all $100 you have to try to win that $4 with just one pair. But something like a set would well be worth it, right? However, if the pot was $80, then it would probably be a really good investment to try to get all in with that top pair type hand. And let's say the pot was $300. Well, you can bet that you'd want to try and win that pot with even something just like second pair weak draw. I mean, the amount of money you can win for such a small investment just makes going after that money that much more worthwhile. And that's the way SPR works. It's an easy calculation you can do to figure out how strong your hand needs to be to get all in on the flop. All you do is, when the flop comes down, divide the size of your stack or the effective stack, which is the smallest stack at the table that is involved in the pot you are playing in. You divide this by the size of the pot. This gives you your SPR. Now it's a bit more complicated than raw numbers, since the nature of your opponent and how they play will alter things a bit, but basically, if your SPR is in the 3 to 4 range, you can get all in with a top pair. At 5 to 7 SPR, you can get all in with an overpair. You need a slightly stronger hand as your SPR grows. And above 8 SPR, you usually need like 2 pair or better, some kind of really, really strong hand to get all in. On the other end of the spectrum, if you have an SPR of like 1, now you can get all in with like second pairs and that type of thing. Less than a 1 SPR, you can almost get all in with any piece of the board, any kind of draw, anything like that, just because there's so much money to be won relative to how much money you have left in your stack. Understanding SPR will help you stop overcommitting or undercommitting hands after the flop. If you want to know more about this subject, check out the book Professional No Limit Hold'em. I'll put a link in the description. By the way, to achieve lower SPRs, I recommend that students start out by playing a smaller than normal stack of, say, somewhere between 30 and 40 big blinds. You can learn more about that in my book, Automatic Poker. Now, using SPR becomes easier if we learn more about what our opponents are doing. That leads me to our next tip. Complete beginners don't have to do this right off the bat, but if you have been playing for a bit and already know the basics, you need to start profiling opponents and altering your strategy accordingly. However, I would keep this fairly rudimentary at first. I recommend that you use just a 3-tree system of categorizing opponents. Label them as either tight, loose, or normal. Let me tell you how to do this the most simple way possible. If you see someone playing a lot of hands that has been involved in nearly half the pots or greater since you've been playing with them, label them as loose. If someone is seemingly never playing a hand and appears to be waiting patiently on a strong hand to get involved, label them as tight. Now, you don't need to label normal people since they require no adjustment. Just look out for the extremes for now. By the way, once you learn about SPR, this system of categorizing opponents will help you get even better at figuring out how to play your hands after the flop. Speaking of commitment, before you get too complicated and go down the SPR rabbit hole, here is a quick tip to save you a bunch of money in the meantime. It's really quite simple. Turn raises are almost always the nuts. River raises are always the nuts. While this isn't always 100% true, if you just stick to this rule and fold all 1 pair hands or worse when you get raised on the turn and river, you will be much better off. The exception is on the flop. While folding 1 pair hands is often best when your SPR is 5 or higher, you can often continue with a strong hand due to the implied odds. The implied odds basically means your potential to win future money based on the current stack sizes, right? In fact, it's often better to have a draw than a 1 pair hand when you get raised, since it's much easier to improve since you actually have more outs with a draw to make the best hand. In other words, there are more cards in the deck that could give you the best hand when you have a draw than when you hold just 1 pair. One of the biggest beginner mistakes I see is to only think about 1 hand at a time. You have to remember that there is more than 1 hand that a person could have that may take a similar action. This is why you need to start thinking about all of the hands both you and your opponent could hold. The easiest way to get started doing this is by categorizing your post-flop hands. When I teach students, I have them categorize the nature or strength of their hand into one of 4 tiers. That makes it easy to commit the correct amount of money to the pot more often and take more appropriate lines with different parts of your hand range. Here are the tiers. Tier 1 includes all of your nut hands, right? All of your hands that are super strong. Usually these are like 2 pairs or better, like trips, full houses, flushes, all that stuff, right? But it also can include the strongest draws that you could have. Like let's say you have an open-end straight draw, in other words, about 8 outs from the straight, and you have an additional bunch of outs from a flush draw. So having a straight and a flush draw, this is called a combo draw. That is also considered a Tier 1 hand. Tier 2 usually includes top pair hands and strong 8+ out draws. These include your normal, flush draws, open-ended straight draws, and things like that. Tier 3 is what I call my showdown value range, but it also includes some other hands as well. Showdown value basically just means that you have a hand that could possibly be good were the hand to check down right now to the river and both players show down their cards. Second or third pair, under pairs, overcards, ace high type hands can be good if you checked it down to the river. However, you can also include some weak draws in this range. Hands that have some potential to improve but really aren't strong enough to get all in with. Hands like 2 overcards and maybe backdoor draws on an overcard, gut shot straight draws with an overcard. That type of thing could be considered a Tier 3 hand. Tier 4 hands are complete air. You have no piece of the board, no draw, and very little chance to improve. It's basically the easiest tier to figure out because you don't have anything, right? Balancing means to not have a disproportionate number of bluffs or value bets in your range. A bluff, of course, is when you bet when you probably don't have the best hand. And a value bet is a bet you make when you probably do have the best hand and can get called by worse hands. Bluffs try to get people to fold better hands. Value bets try to get value from worse hands. It's very simple, right? But if you play this disproportionately, like you bluff too much or you only value bet when you have strong hands, it can make you very easy to read and play against. Because if you are only ever betting the nuts, people can just fold everything but their strong hands to your bets. If you are bluffing every single time you have a weak hand, they can just call you down with anything that connects with a board. My advice is that until you have beaten the microstakes consistently for a long time, there is no place to start overcomplicating things with balancing. You are almost never going to be playing people at that level capable of exploiting you, and your opponents will be so bad that the benefits of being balanced are far outweighed by your need to take advantage of the huge leaks your opponents have. Besides, just adhering to the fundamentals of poker and categorizing your hands into tiers will most likely take care of balancing and allow you to exploit your opponents at the same time. Hopefully this video has given you a roadmap on what and how to learn in structuring your study going forward. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.